I expect that's going to be another 5 or 10 years, and that's going to be much more common, would be my sense. Mixed mode designs. Sometimes it makes sense to not only go for one of these modes, but to mix them. For the next Austrian election study, sorry, I'm going to stop talking about election studies in about 10 minutes from now, but that's the examples I can draw from. So, in the next Austrian election study we're planning for this year or next year, whenever the government falls, which could happen very soon, but maybe they're going to last a bit longer. We're going to make a mix of telephone and online, because we know we cannot reach many people via landlines anymore, and we talked about that briefly already. We don't have mobile numbers in any registry. So to reach those people that we likely cannot reach via telephone anymore, we try to use online, and we add those data together then. There's a lot of literature on mixed mode designs, on how that influences answer quality, answer options, the answers themselves really. I readily admit I'm not a big specialist on mixed mode designs, but if you're interested in reading more about this, I mean, Google Scholar mixed mode research survey designs or so, and you get good literature. Some good Dutch people actually. I'm trying to recall the name. There's a very good Dutch scientist in Leiden, I think, working on mixed mode designs. Don't know that. Let's compare some of these. So, we've got mail, online, face-to-face, and telephone as the 4 dominant modes, and different aspects that we could compare them on. So, visualization of answer options, which is, as we will see in a second, sometimes very important to do, can actually show something to people. Yes, you can do that in mail. Yes, you can do it online. Yes, you can do that face-to-face. No, you can't do it on the telephone. Yeah? But if it's important that people can see things, which is often important with illiterate samples, so a lot of people in the sample that can't read or write, that would be a big advantage. With children, we often use visualizations, and we'll see a couple of examples later how it can be done. Can a question have many answer categories? Yes, it can in mail, because you can read through them basically. Yes, it can online. Face-to-face is already getting difficult. The interviewer is reading out those answer options, and there's a list of 20 issues. What's the most important issue for your country? Is it A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, P? A lot of answer options. The advantage is that with face-to-face, the respondent can actually ask the interviewer again. Maybe the interviewer can show a list at some point, but it's difficult. On the telephone, it's getting really tricky, because people also don't dare to ask questions back on the telephone. Problems with anonymity. I'm changing between German and US laptops at the moment, and the Z and the Y are exchanged on the keyboards. Problems with anonymity. With mail, yes, people sense that their anonymity is endangered. I mean, essentially, it's not really. You might see a stamp of on the return letter that would indicate where the person's come from, maybe. But people often fear that it's less anonymous because they've gotten a letter to their address with their name on it, and so on. Online, usually not. I mean, there's some people who always fear that you get their IP address and get scared about that, but usually that's not the case. Face-to-face, certainly. I mean, you're sitting face-to-face to the other person, so you can always assume, yeah, that person knows who I am now, right? Although the data will not be treated in any such way and will be kept strictly anonymous, but people have a sense of a less anonymous situation. With telephone, it's a bit unclear how people perceive that in the literature. Flexibility. Are there reactions possible from the side of the respondents? No with mail, no with online. Yes, face-to-face. Yes, telephone. That should be very self-evident, I guess. Can you use open answer options? We'll talk about that in a second. Yes, you can in mail. Yes, you can online. Yes, you can do face-to-face. On the telephone, it's already difficult because then the interviewer has to write down the answer that he's getting from the person on the telephone. If people are getting very talkative or speaking very very colloquial. You know, you're never sure whether you get really correct transcripts of what people are saying. So, difficult. Are reading and writing skills required? Is literacy required? Yes for mail, yes for online, no for face-to-face, and no for telephone. So again, something to consider when you target special populations here. Can you evaluate, in a way, the quality of the answers? And we'll get back to that later on as well. No, you can't with mail. You don't know in what context and how that was filled in, not even by whom. Online, that's also very difficult. So you can look at response time latency. So you can look at how quickly people actually answer a question online. We'll come to that later again. Face-to-face. Yes, you get a sense of how serious people are when they answer the question, whether they're thinking about it, whether they're just giving guesses basically. You get a sense of that. On the telephone, difficult. Sometimes you would, not always. Response rates, and again that's something we'll talk about in a second. For mail, do you get high response rates? Do you get a lot of return? For mail, usually not. So you send out a lot of envelopes and you get very little. Online differs a little bit. Our recent study that we did when we also tried different incentives for online service were actually quite encouraging. We had 35-40% response rates for online, which is actually fairly decent. Face-to-face, usually yes. It's a much more direct situation. For telephone, rather no at the moment. And that's, I'm speaking about the research I'm familiar with, which mostly comes from Western types of countries. So I'm not sure whether all this applies to the Indian context, for example. Oh, sorry, I didn't translate something. Are the costs low? Yes, costs are fairly low for mail. You know, it's a bit of printing, it's a bit of stamps, and buying envelopes, but costs are fairly low. Online costs are very low usually. You need to program something. Face-to-face is very expensive. You need one interviewer for every interview that you know. That interviewer could spend an hour, maybe two, on doing one interview. You need to pay these people. Very expensive. Telephone, also quite expensive nowadays. Again, Western European perspective. I'm not sure about the Indian context, and we talked a little bit about costs, which seem to be lower here definitely. But again, you need interviewers here who do the job, and you need to pay those people. So this has a tendency to be more costly. I'll correct that error later. Can you reach different target groups? With mail, you can. I mean, you can select groups. You can very work in the way of targeting. Way online, yeah, depends on what type of target groups. Same goes for face-to-face. Sometimes it's easier with face-to-face to target certain groups. We wanted to survey Muslims in Amsterdam a couple of years ago. And that's very hard to do because if you do that online or via telephone, you get a very selective sample of Muslim immigrants or Muslims living in the country because they usually speak the language very well, which means they are fairly well integrated into the Dutch society, or tend to be. So we decided to have stalls on the different bigger markets in Amsterdam, in the regions where a lot of Muslims would be living, and had Muslim interviewers trying to seek out the respondents that they would think are the ones that we wouldn't get in any other way. You know, usually older women, for instance, that we would never get online or on the telephone, and probably not even face to face. So that was an interesting experience. It worked actually quite well. Though we're still working on the methods of application of that, because we do have the online sample, we do have the telephone sample, we do have the street sample of Muslims in the Netherlands, and it's very interesting to compare these different samples, right? Because they do look very different. So face-to-face easier, telephone usually very hard to target different groups based on telephone numbers. Do respondents have time to think? For mail, yes. They are not restricted, they can think as long as they can, and they want to answer the question. For online, yes, in a way they do. you can take your time. Face-to-face, you know, it's a situation that someone's sitting there and waiting for your answer. So you could take your time potentially, but you will feel some pressure to actually give an answer at some point. And for telephone, usually no. People, you know, silence on the telephone is very awkward, so you would want to give an answer very quickly. Personal contact, interview effects. Does it play a role here? We'll get to those interview effects in a second. No, of course not with mail, no online. Yes, face-to-face, and yes, to some degree, telephone as well. You know, it doesn't matter whether a male or a female interviewer is asking questions about certain topics, for instance, and that would play out on the telephone. How long service possible? With mail, you know, if people get a booklet like this with survey questions, they're very likely to not even start answering it. So, with online, we tend to say now that online survey is 20 minutes, maximum 25 minutes, but that's really as long as people would take when they're in an online environment to type in survey questions. Anything above that, you get a lot of dropout rates, high dropout rates, a lot of dropout during the survey. Face-to-face usually can work, you know, you've got face-to-face interviews that last for an hour, easily, some even longer. It's an interpersonal situation, you're sitting at the kitchen table, you might be having a coffee. It works well. Telephone again, no. I mean, if you're lucky, people are willing to answer questions on the telephone, but then after 20-25 minutes again, they're definitely getting nervous and want to hang out at some point. So for long stuff, face-to-face is probably the best. Alternative, do you get a quick data turnaround? Do you get your data very quickly? With mail, yes, fairly. I mean, if people don't fill in the survey on the first day or 2 or 3 after they got it, they won't do it. You know? I'm sure you know how it is. You get important mail and deal with it, even with it on the first 2 days. Otherwise, it's getting lost in your email inbox, and you'll never look at it again. So it's fairly quick, a week or 2, which is not too bad really. Online, yes, definitely. You know, with many online services, you'll have data within 2 or 3 days from most respondents. It would answer the survey, and also it shows that then if you wait longer, it's not really worth waiting because the additional data you get in is very small. Face-to-face takes ages. You know, unless you have an army of interviewers, which we usually don't have. So, you know, for representatives to survey over 800 or 1,000 people, you might have 20, 30 interviews. And now consider every interview takes an hour, maybe takes an hour for them to get from one interview to the next one. They'll be knocking on doors several times before they actually get the person that they want to interview. So for face-to-face, I don't know, what was your field period here for face-to-face?
It depends upon the size of the sample. So
sure.
For example, for a sample of 5%, include 80 people were working. 80, and we do almost 2 weeks.
Which is still very quick, actually.
I mean, data entry.
Yeah, data entry is another point, exactly. Because face-to-face, well, if you don't look up, then there's a point, yeah. I know of surveys, you know, that take 3, 4, 5 months to be completed. Again, the European Social Survey is a lot done still with face-to-face, and sometimes you can 2 or 3 months data collection periods easily in different countries. Which sometimes is very annoying, also from a, again, election studies perspective. We want to do a survey right after the election. If you do face-to-face, you get a few people right after the election, but you get also a few people 3 months after the election. And a lot happened in between, which is very hard to see. So, face-to-face, no quick turnaround. Telephone, yes. If you use with a CAFI system where people type in and the interview is not too long and you've got a decent number of interviewers, you know, telephone interviews can be completed, representative samples for in a week or 2 or something. So that's some of the. I want to focus very briefly again on online service because that's going to be where many of us will be going, maybe even in this country in the next 5 to 10 years or so, especially when mobile online services are becoming maybe easier to conduct. So advantages again, they're cheap, they're quick, they're rather effortless. So you need someone to program a survey, which is not rocket science really, and you need email addresses for distributions. But it's not a lot of work really. You can use, I haven't even mentioned that, they have multimedia presentations. So you can show people videos or photos definitely. You can play audio files if you're interested in doing that. And you can get fairly great samples quite easily if you get a lot of email addresses. The French election study now started with a 20,000 or 25,000 online sample, which is quite good, right? You have an automated data entry into a data file. So people typing in their data is automatically stored somewhere, and you don't have to do the data entry, which is of course nice. It's very nice for filtering questions, and we look at filter questions in a second, but that means that you know, for some respondents it can make sense to jump certain blocks of questions, which, you know, on a mail survey is almost impossible to do really. Online that's very easily programmed. And you can module the questionnaires. You can say, I want half of my respondents to look at this group of questions and the other half look at this group of questions. Very easy. And you usually can get the timestamps for the answer. So you can look at how quickly people typed in an answer, or how deeply they were thinking about an answer, and use that for various different things, which is really, really nice. Disadvantage, sampling again biased towards certain demographic, and that's still the case even in countries with high internet penetration. Response rates are not always optimal, but that seems to be a bit shaky really at the point. Sometimes high self-selection of participants and very low motivation to participate in these surveys, and I'm sure some of you get bombarded with online surveys at certain times, so I open the next one. Technical problems still play a role, so some surveys you program only work with certain browsers, and then as soon as people use an old version of Safari, it doesn't work anymore, or things like that, and then you can't open it on your mobile device. If you want to do it on your tablet, it might not work. Connection speed is an issue, especially if you want to use multimedia things. Does the internet connection hold? If the connection is disrupted at some point during the survey, all the data might be gone, which could be really annoying. You don't have any control of the context. You don't know where people are filling it in, and actually you also don't know who's filling it in. You know, could be anyone using the computer or using the same email address. Computer literacy might matter, though that should become less of an issue, I guess. And depending a little bit on the program you're using, some programs will only enter the data once the entire survey is completed, which is very annoying if people just drop out a few questions before, because then you lose all the data from those people that they have entered before. If you want to do these things or look at some options, I mean, there's a great many commercial options out there that you can use, and that are sometimes even free to look at Qualtrics, for instance, which is a program that allows you very easily to program online surveys, and there's a free version of that. At least you can use smaller samples. SurveyMonkey, I think Google has a survey option. So there's a lot of options out there now to implement your own service very easily. It's basically copy-pasting from the Word document, and it takes 2 hours, and you've got a nice looking online survey that you can use for various purposes. Let's quickly cover another one of those basic issues in this first slot. Let's relate somewhat to sampling that we talked about yesterday, but it's different than sampling because it's basically the next step in terms of judging your data quality. And I have it today and not yesterday because sampling is very general, and we talked about sampling newspapers as well, or sampling villages or whatever. Response rates usually apply to surveys only because the newspaper article won't refuse to participate in the survey or in a contra-analysis, whereas a sample research participant might refuse to take part in whatever you want to do. The response rate then tells you something about the share of respondents that actually participate after being contacted, or according to the AA4 guideline, the number of eligible sample units that cooperate in the survey. Now we'll be looking at a lot of AA4 things, the American Association for Public Opinion Research, because they've been at the forefront for the past 20, 30 years in terms of dealing with response rate issues. And if you look at publications and people reporting response rates, then you would add, I'm using the AA4 response rate definition 1, 2, 3, 4, and calculated my response rate that way. So AA4, have a look at the website also. It's a great resource if you're interested in learning more about response rates.